Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm in the Temecula Valley sitting with Damian Doffo of Doffo Winery. Damian is the CEO and winemaker of this family business. Damian, welcome, and tell us about Doffo Winery.
Thank you very much for having me. So we're a boutique winery in Temecula Valley. We specialize in red wines. We like to make these big, full-bodied reds with a soft tannin profile. And we also have a passion for vintage motorcycles and everything moto.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But about the winery, how many acres do you have? And do you own everything you work with? Are you purchasing, leasing? Like, what's your story there?
So the winery property sits on 15 acres with about 12 and a half planted. And then my father, myself, and my sister, who all are involved in the company, we all have acreage in the same neighborhood of the winery. And then we own a few extra plots within the neighborhood of the winery as well. So we have about gross just under 30 acres planted, probably 20-something or so. I haven't really net planted acres. And then we manage a few vineyards in the valley. We hand select which properties that we want to work with, and then we apply our farming techniques and our practices to those properties. I do source a little bit of local fruit within, that is managed by somebody who I can help manage the property. I don't like to buy fruit from properties that I am blind to the farming practices. So, but I like to champion Temecula Valley fruit, and we don't bring in any fruit that's not from Temecula Valley. We're 100% Temecula Valley.
Love it. So you said you like to make big reds, and I'm curious if you can kind of list out the varieties you're growing and working with. And I know there are a few whites in there you'll mention too.
So we do a lot of the Bordeaux, so Cab Franc, Malbec. We have a few rows of Petit Verdot, but that gets blended into the Cab and Cab Franc into our Cab program. And then we have Syrah, Zinfandel, and let me see if I'm missing any. Petit Syrah, yeah, definitely. That's a newcomer for us, so we've just been planting Petit Syrah as of late, but that's about it.
And on white wines?
White wines, we make a Viognier and a Vermentino, and then a blend of the two.
Okay. And how many cases do you make, and where are your wines available? Are they local, in the markets, across the country?
So we make about just under 10,000 cases of wine a year, and we're 100% direct-to-consumer. We do a sprinkling of local distribution into select restaurants and key cities. We're in a few restaurants in San Diego. Obviously, locally, we try to put wines in Old Town, because we feel like Temecula Valley needs to be represented in town, and LA, Orange County.
So your family is of Argentine heritage. Your father was born and raised in Argentina before he came here to the U.S. Wine is not an unfamiliar thing in these cultures. And of course, you're of Italian heritage even further back. So wine definitely plays a role in the cultures you come from. But I'm curious what your first memory of wine is.
Oh, my first memories of wine start at the dinner table. And it was, total commonplace for there to be wine on the dinner table every night. Never in excess, but I remember, we would start out with probably less than an ounce of wine, in my glass, and then watered down with club soda. And so essentially it was pink water. But as I grew up, that ratio started to change. And then it was kind of common to be able to have a glass of wine at dinner with my father. By 14, 15, I was having a glass of wine. And even like in my high school years, 17, 18, we had a wine cellar, and he would actually leave a row in the wine cellar saying, "Don't drink my good stuff. If you're going to have a glass of wine when I'm not home," because he'd go out, he'd take off for the weekends or something. He'd leave me a row in the wine cellar that I knew I could have that bottle of wine and there wouldn't be any issues. And so it was super common for me to have. I had a really tight-knit group of friends, and we would do like we do now, is light the barbecue and hang out, have a glass of wine, and enjoy meat and barbecue and wine all night long.
Wow. Not a very typical American upbringing, but very European. So obviously you started drinking wine young, not in a bad way, and you've drunk a lot of good wine, I'm sure, in your travels and home. Is there a particular wine, one of those aha moments or one of those memorable wines that sort of stands out to you that, just it's unforgettable because of where you were, the timing, the place, or how it set you on a path with wine or wine drinking?
Ah, man, that's a loaded question because my dad was a big wine enthusiast and his best friend is even a bigger wine enthusiast. And so pretty early on, I was introduced to some very big wines, Chateau Margaux, Opus One, Insignia, Cinq-Sepas, just you name it. I was, 14, 15, trying these really high-end wines, and I feel like that really shaped my palate and what I, later would come to realize that totally shaped my influence on winemaking. There wasn't one wine in particular that was just incredible, but trying those 20-year-old Bordeaux's, or my dad had verticals of Opus and stuff like that. It was something incredible that, it very few people, I think, have those opportunities at that age to try those wines. And then, or being able to go into, like, my dad's best friend, he had a wine cellar. It was pretty extensive, 4,000 bottles. And I remember he would blindfold my dad and say, okay, anything that you grab off the wall, we're going to open right now. And it wasn't just one bottle. That went on all night long, and so we were just anything that came off.
A nice blur of wines after a certain while.
Yeah, and the photos the next day, you'd get photos, and it was just, the Wine Spectator top hits almost,
Wow. Well, so your dad was a collector. You got to drink a lot of good wines, a lot of big names when you were a teenager. Now as an adult, if we were to come to your home, what would we find in your home? Do you collect certain things? Do you drink from particular regions? Is it a nice smattering around the world? Like, what would we find in your cellar or cellars?
In my personal cellar, what you would find is older vintages of our wine. And so when I do go out and purchase wine, I usually gravitate to the wines that are the style that we make. Because that's what I like. I make what I like, right? And so I like big wines with soft tannin profiles, something that, is full and luscious on the palate. I don't like to wince or pucker when you take a sip of something. And so I find wines that mimic that. And if I do buy one, I usually buy two, one for me, one for Dad, and I'll bring something back and, let him try it. But my wine cellar is, I need to reorganize. I have a ton of cases of wine sitting there, but on the shelves right now, I probably have 2012s, 13s, 14s that I'm currently drinking. And it's really interesting to try, our wines almost 7-10 years later. And they're doing fantastic.
So speaking of that, is there a particular wine you opened recently of your own or something else you drank that just drank really well that recently? I know you were, yeah.
I had, so one of my best winemaking years, or the year that I felt like I made it, or I turned the corner as far as really feeling comfortable. I always equate winemaking to a golf swing, right? Where when you get that golf swing just right, everything just feels beautiful and it's right and it's like a symphony. And I felt like 2014 harvest was that for me. I felt like there was so many wines that just were so good and so well made. So 14s, I had a Cab Reserve 14 that I was like, damn, we did good, And
sat back, a little pat on the back,
yeah, Totally. And another vintage like that was 17. I felt like 17, we made some incredible wines in 17 as well.
So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect grape variety?
No, I think that the beauty of the wine industry is the diversity of the grape varietals, and I think there's wines for different moods, wines for different foods, wines for, of course, different occasions, for different temperatures, for different environments. So there isn't one that's going to hit all the marks every time. So no, I think that. But that's the beauty of the wine, right?
Absolutely.
The diversity.
Well, for you as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Depends on what I'm doing.
All of the above.
All of them at the same time. No, so it really depends. It's very situational for me, and I break the rules. I'm not a stuffy type of, I'm not a book-taught winemaker. I'm very gut shot. I almost call it like guerrilla winemaking is how I learned how to make wine in a backyard, and so I don't get stuck on the rules, and so like I'll put ice in a Viognier if I need. Yeah, oh my god. Stop, yeah. But when you're working in a 110-degree day and you come in for lunch and you want something cold and refreshing, a big glass of iced down Viognier is damn good.
Well, speaking of rules, I'm curious about this. Obviously I've had the pleasure to twice have Argentine barbecue with your family, and a lot of meat in that. When it comes to food and wine pairing, are you a rule follower? Is it red wine with meat, or are you a rule breaker? Do you think there are rules we should follow, more importantly, or how do you approach pairing food and wine, especially when you're living in a climate that's very hot, over 100 degrees, but you're eating meats and heavier foods as well?
I do follow the traditional rules of, whites with seafood and lighter fare and reds with the heavier stuff. But I feel like there are some wines that are kind of exceptional or exceptions to the rule. Like I'll do our rosé, our Malbec rosé, with barbecued pork ribs. And, and we don't do like the traditional pork rib. We do salt and open and on mesquite. But that with rosé in the summertime is killer. Chilled rosé with, some pork ribs is one of my favorite pairings, and it's not a traditional pairing.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's tasty. It's pretty tasty. So if the wine can stand up to the food, sure, why not? But yeah, I usually do try to stick more traditional as far as the classic pairings.
So you're a winery that is direct to consumer. You have a very loyal wine club. You have, access to 8 million consumers that come into Temecula Valley. It's a popular place, but I'm curious what your opinion is as a winemaker, but also maybe as a wine drinker about wine critics and scores. Do they play a role in your life? Is it a love-hate relationship? How do you see wine critics?
So Temecula is unique in the sense that we do see a lot of people, and the law of numbers, you're going to sell wine based on law of numbers, right? And so only in the last, I would say, 3-4 years have I really started to pay attention to wine critics and to make a concerted effort to submit wines to trade publications to see how we fare. Thankfully, we've done very well, and we normally place with everything that we submit. Maybe they're not all golds, but we're on the board. We're on the board, and you don't get like the thank you for participating, but you didn't make the cut letter. So we get on the board quite often, and really, it started out as kind of like a personal thing to see how do we stack up against the rest. Because you kind of get tired of hearing people, oh, you only sell wine because you get so many people coming in. Of course you're going to sell wine, or you sell your wine at $90 a bottle because you're popular in the valley and you don't make enough. And so, yeah, you can get those price points. But I feel like having that backing of scores to say, hey, hold on, this thing got a double gold. It got this. It got best in show. We send wines to the San Francisco competitions and we place. I mean, those are kind of big accolades for a small bootstrap winery in the valley. So lately we've been submitting more. Do I make it my end all be all? No, because it doesn't really change anything for me. But
because you make wines you like to drink.
I make wines I like to drink, and honestly, the gold medal for me is every time that somebody buys a bottle, hey, we just got a gold medal, literally, and figuratively. So it's one of those things that it helps when you go into distribution, when we're going in, now we're putting wines into restaurants and stuff like that. So you kind of give yourself a little bit of ammo to be able to back your price points and back the wines, and it also gives that restaurant the kind of confidence, or even the retailer, like, hey, this wine did well, I got points in this publication, so it must be good.
So I'm curious, for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste Doffo wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
I feel like they're missing out on almost like an aha moment of the valley. I really like changing people's perception of Temecula Valley. I think that's one of my favorite things when they try our wines, or being told, hey, I don't like any Temecula wines, but you changed my mind about what can be done in Temecula. And so for me, that's probably, I think, what people are missing out on, because we've, for a long time, Temecula's carried this reputation, and that reputation was way before me. And I feel like in the last decade and a half, the wines have gotten progressively better, and there are a handful of wineries that are truly focused on making excellent wines. I mean, there's some really nice wines coming out of the valley. And so I feel like that's the biggest thing that you're missing out on, is that ability to change your mind about Temecula Valley.
I like that. So if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with, to say, welcome to Doffo Winery?
That's a great question. The space aliens, huh? I'm going to go with my tried and true favorite. I love our Syrah. Syrah is probably one of my favorite wines to make and to consume. That's usually what I gravitate towards if I'm having dinner. I usually reach for a bottle of Syrah. And I feel like that's one that I would definitely welcome somebody with.
I love that. So you've been in the valley for a long time now. Your Doffo Winery is celebrating 25 years as we speak. So you came here as a young adult when your dad got the property, and obviously you spend time in the vineyards. You walk among the vines. You live here and you breathe it. It's a hot place. We're in a warm climate. I'm curious how vintage plays a role here. We know every vintage tells a different story, but how much variation do you see here, or do you see a lot more consistency? What have you noticed over 25 years here in the valley?
A lot of consistency, right? There's been a couple really interesting years. 2011 was a really light crop across the board in the valley. And then we went into a huge bumper crop in 12. And that was a really interesting year, because 10 was kind of light, 11 was kind of light. And so 12, what happened is everybody contracted every vineyard possible, every little half acre planted had a contract. It was nuts. It was hard to lock in contracts for vineyards. And then everybody kind of got slapped in the face, because then the yields were up like 30% above normal for some reason. And so all of a sudden, you're buried in fruit. And so 12 was a really interesting year, but you get these couple seasons that we've had some unusually hot weather. I think in 2017 there was like Father's Day heat wave. I remember it was Father's Day, I think it was 17. And I remember walking downstairs and going, wow, it's 8 in the morning and it's already 90 degrees. And, it was just unprecedented. I think the vineyard temperatures, the wires in the vineyards got up to like 130, 140 degrees. It was cooking. And so you get these every so often, but every one of those experiences has taught us what not to do. And so I think that the vineyards that are in tune, see these events coming, and we know how to react to them. We changed the orientation of how we plant vineyards based off of heat occurrences. Mm-hmm. So we've learned that we need to orientate the vineyards a certain way to make it through the hot weather, because if you have them facing the wrong way, they just get blasted. So we've changed how we plant vineyards. We stress the importance of canopy management, and irrigation, of course, in your irrigation practices. And that's the biggest thing, is understanding how to irrigate and understanding the different soil types on each different block. So we implement soil tensiometers to see soil tension. We're using pressure tests on the leaves to see how they're retaining water. And so being in tune with irrigation and also understanding, best practices.
Well, speaking of being in tune, when you're walking through the vineyards, do you talk to your vines? Do you communicate with them? And if so, what do you say to them?
I don't. My dad does. My dad's the vine whisperer. He'll high five the vines and check in on them and stuff like that. And I don't do that. I'm not gonna lie here, But when I did work more hands-on in the vineyard, I did, because when you shoot thinning and stuff like that, you're talking to them and, hey, why are you creeping up on this one? You got to untangle them and say, hey, man, give this one some space, or this and that. But my dad does have conversations with the vineyards and high fives them. And
I love it.
But we've always played classical music for the vines. That's something that's totally unique in the valley. We're the only winery.
For the vines, not for the wine in the barrel, but for the vines.
For the vines. When we established the first property, my dad put a speaker system in the middle of the vineyard, and we have a four-way amplifier, four-way speakers, and we play classical music sun up to sundown to the vines every day. And it's actually something that to this day, my dad, if he comes by and he doesn't hear the music, I'm on it, I get the text message like, why isn't the music on in the vineyard, or somebody turned off the amplifier, or somebody hit something in the AV rack, and I gotta go.
So if I walked out there right now, I'd hear classical music.
If somebody didn't turn off an amplifier, absolutely. It actually has its own XM. We have its own XM subscription and amplifier, and it's on an auto on-off. Because some of the neighbors complained about the classical music and on all night, and so we had to turn it off.
To think of all the people who laugh at me when I ask that question, and then you actually have speakers playing. See, it's not a crazy question. No. So I'm curious, in the years, you're a very tight family, you and your sisters and your dad, the four of you. I'm curious if you've set and you have a very tight team. I mean, between the tasting room and everything, a really loyal community, like a family. So I'm curious if you have any good luck rituals or any sort of things you guys do at the beginning of harvest to say it's a new season. Any traditions or?
We don't, but what I do like to do is I barbecue for the crew after harvest when we pick the last block. My dad and myself like to, because the crews that pick aren't our normal production crew. So I have, a team of 5 that are our normal vineyard guys, and then during harvest they work on the crush pad. But then we also employ a subcontractor that has a picking crew, and so it's our tradition is to, after harvest, is to thank them. And so we do carne asada and cerveza and just say, hey, come eat with us, thank you very much, and just be grateful for the help.
So a tradition, but post-harvest as opposed to pre.
Yeah, I had, when I first started as the winemaker, I had a lucky t-shirt that I would wear every bottling until it just got so torn up, and then...
And bottling still went well when you didn't wear your lucky t-shirt?
We haven't missed a beat yet, so apparently it wasn't the t-shirt,
So, Damian, I'm curious, when you were younger, before you became a gut taught winemaker, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a race car driver.
A race car driver.
Race car driver, yeah. I thought I was going to race cars. I used to say I was going to go to Cal Poly Pomona and race cars or design race cars. So I went to Cal Poly Pomona, but I didn't do the race car thing. But now we race motorcycles, so I'll take it.
Yeah, so, I know when you're not working, you like to spend your free time. Your whole family rides motorcycles. Let's talk about that just a little bit. You guys have, it's a pretty unique tasting room because you have a very large collection of motorcycles. How many do you have?
Altogether, 253.
And this is a range of motorcycles, brands going back to the 19...
Yeah, so it's a pretty eclectic mix. So if you were to categorize my dad's collection, the bulk of the collection are vintage Italian singles, so single CCs. A lot of the bikes are from his childhood, in essence. My dad grew up very poor in Argentina on the farm, right? And the main means of transportation in Argentina at the time was motorcycles, and Argentina was importing several Italian brands of motorcycles. So my dad's affinity for Ducati starts there. And so a large part of the collection is Ducati, vintage Ducatis. But in the barrel room, in the moto barrel room, we put a lot of motorcycles outside and inside that would have been people's first introduction to motorcycles. So we wanted to create a connection. So when people walk through that, they say, oh my God, that was my first motorcycle. My aunt had that bike. My uncle had. I can't tell you how many people I've seen cry as they walk through the patio of the barrel room and they see their bikes that bring them right back to their childhood. And so a lot of the bikes on the outside of the building are small CC, Japanese, Italian. We have some German bikes out there too. But bikes that all have a cool history to them or something unique about them, and even bikes that were given to us. We have a lot of bikes that people in our wine club will show up and say, hey, I've had this bike sitting in my backyard for 30 years. Do you want it?
And you guys refurbish bikes and things like that.
So in my dad's retirement, he's always done the restorations, but now he's a lot more focused on restoring motorcycles. Not all of them get restored because there's something really cool about having a bike with an original patina. So if we purchase bikes now, it's usually complete originals, right? Where they haven't been modified, they haven't been painted or restored. Because the problem when you restore a motorcycle, typically you do what's called like an over restoration. They're prettier than they were when they were new. Right? Because the paint's better now, the metallurgy's better now, there's a lot of things that are better now than they were in the 40s and 50s, and so you kind of make them prettier than they ever were, right? And so you can very easily over-restore a motorcycle.
Huh. And so you are the family that cycles together. So the family that cycles together stays together. The family that makes wine together, drinks together,
The best is that we race together, and we're in our racing organization that we race with, we're the only father, son, daughter, wife that all race in the same class together.
Wow.
So typically we make up about a third of the grid when we go racing, which is really fun.
Wow. So when you're not racing or riding motorcycles around town, what else do you like to do in your free time, if you have free time?
I love spending time with my kids. My kids are awesome, so I really enjoy spending time with them. Me personally, I like to road cycle as well. But the road cycling is to keep me fit for racing, so it's kind of like the reason I get up early and go hit the roads is, but also mental clarity. I feel like there's something very special about riding through wine country at 6 a.m. Hot air balloons are lifting up off the ground. There's just clean, fresh air. It's peaceful, it's quiet, and it really gives me a little bit of time to myself to gather my thoughts and be grateful for where we live. It's a slice of heaven where we live. This little Temecula bubble, compared to everything else in Southern California, it's really special.
And do you have Any other favorite sports, or I mean, are you a golf player as well, or you just likened it to a golf swing and not a golf player?
So I play golf once a year. We have a winemaker golf tournament that we play. It's a charity fundraiser that the association puts on. So I dust off the clubs once a year. Mostly go for, the beer and the camaraderie, to see everybody out there. But no, the tasting room being open Saturday and Sunday, and that's when it's our major time to really, get after it and make the mortgage payments, right? Doesn't really allow for a lot of sports. Yeah, and it's free time to watch sports. So we watch MotoGP, which is essentially the Formula One of motorcycle racing, right? The fastest 22 people in the world on prototype motorcycles, doing over 200 miles an hour and dragging knees and elbows and shoulders on the asphalt as they go through a corner. So, and that's a 45-minute viewing, so it's just long enough,
So if you were, if the person you were rooting for, I don't know all the racers, so I can't call them by name. It's not my sport, But if the person you were rooting for won, which of your wines would you want to congratulate them with? Which Doffo wine?
Oh, man. Probably the Malbec or the Cab Reserve. We've been very blessed in the sense that we've actually had a few of these racers come visit us.
Wow.
When they come to California for different sponsorship stuff, and so we've gotten a chance to barbecue with factory Ducati MotoGP riders, and 3 of them actually in 3 different occasions. But super blessed, and of course you got to do Malbec and barbecue. You got to show them the Argentine roots, and so typically that's what we're going for.
Nice. So when you look back at your life, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you ever received, and who gave it to you? And it could be something for how your work, how you make wine, or just how you live your life.
One of the best pieces of advice was actually from my dad, and say, do what you love and you never work a day in your life. And I really feel that here at the winery, in the sense that I don't view going to the winery as work anymore. It's just life. This is what we do. Our whole family is dedicated to this. And so it's not, I got to go to work today. It's, I say I got to go to work today, but really it's just, this is all I know. This is what we do, and this is, what the whole family does. And so it's something very special to work with family in that regard. And I wouldn't want it any other way.
Absolutely. So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
So it's not a huge achievement, but the association did these blind tastings in competitions where all the wineries submitted their top wine. And we won that competition 2 years in a row. So we were back-to-back. And then on the second year, we also won Winery of the Year. So,
wow, congratulations.
Thank you. So we kind of swept the local awards, and I would say that was just firing on all cylinders, winning those blind tasting competitions. And the best is that we won it with a Zinfandel. So it just to add injury to insult, it was we won it with a Zinfandel. And 250 people tried the wine blind, and it won outright. And I didn't get to see the votes, but I heard one of them was a landslide. So, wow. Pretty cool.
That's a great achievement. So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
I don't know. I don't know a table without wine. So I don't know.
Non-existent?
Yeah. You stumped me. I don't know what it's like, because I've never had it. So
I know, since you were like a child, wine has always been on the table.
Very nice.
So I want you to imagine another scenario. You're sitting at a table in a restaurant. Doffo wines are on the table, and the paparazzi are pretty excited because someone is sitting next to you sharing that bottle of wine. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, do you wish you could share a bottle of Doffo wine with?
I'd probably say Valentino Rossi. He's a huge icon in the MotoGP world and had a 25-year career, and he has paparazzi following him like crazy. So, that would happen. 2, I like making fun of his accent, so I always kind of mess around with his accent. But he was such an innovator for the sport, and he transcended 2 decades of racing where the style changed, the motorcycles changed, everything changed around him, and he continued to be successful. And now he has multiple brands, and he runs an apparel company. He makes all the apparel for MotoGP, and so to be able to converse with him about not just racing, but about life, about his achievements, about just the vision that he's always had and how to achieve, because he's a very interesting person and a total icon in the industry.
I love it. Well, hopefully he'll get a bottle of Doffo wine.
He's retired now, so maybe Valentino, if you're out there, you got an open invite.
Well, for the time that if you were retiring right now and you were being sent off to a deserted island, this is a pretty cliche question, but what 3 wines would you want to take with you? And any 3 wines, and you don't have to worry about heat or cold or air conditioning or refrigeration. Just what 3 wines would you want to have?
I'm really enamored with our white blend right now, the Gran Bianco. If I'm on an island, I'm definitely going to need a white wine, so I'm going to go with the Gran Bianco. I would take our Cab Reserve because it ages beautifully. You're
going to go with all your own wines, aren't you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, is there any other wine? I didn't know of any other wine, so I'm taking all and Syrah, that's my go-to.
Very easy. I love it. So I'm curious. Okay, while you want to drink your wine, you make wine you like to drink, and you're happy drinking your wine. What wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore?
I actually got to explore one that was on the top of my bucket list right before COVID hit. We did Mendoza, and I've always wanted to go to Mendoza and see the land of the Malbec. And you always hear about the enormity of Mendoza and how vast and big, and it didn't disappoint being able to see some of these behemoth of production facilities. But what was, I guess, the most rewarding part of those travels is when we would go to, we went to Paul Hobbs, we went to Michel Rolland's winery, and we were there during harvest, which was awesome. And being that we were winemakers, they kind of let us see behind the curtain and go into the production areas. And it was very rewarding to see that these super high-end wineries that are making $300 bottle Malbecs and, just world-class wines, that we shared the same production techniques, the triple sorting, the peristaltic pumps, and just to see the lines operating and say, hey, we have the same machinery in essence. I mean, we have the same setup on a smaller scale, of course, but it was really rewarding to see that, hey, we're not crazy, that we are on the right path to making quality wines. And even talking with some of the winemakers, some of the stuff that we're doing, they were in agreement with how we were processing, the way that we were pumping over, just the way that we were doing.
Another great validation of what you're doing. But I'm curious, what's on your list that you haven't been to yet that you want to go to?
I don't know. I think I haven't been to Italy yet, to the wine regions in Italy. So I would say several regions in Italy.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of planning you got to start doing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of regions to explore.
Yeah. So my dad's the one doing all the tours now, because in his retirement he's taking people to different wine regions, and so I'll let him plan and I'll just piggyback.
That sounds pretty good. Well, we've come to that part where we play a little game, pairing wine with music. This will be easy because you drink your wines and you talked about your wines. So if you can tell me kind of the mood that your wine puts you in music-wise. I'm going to start with your Gran Bianco, which is part of your Moto Doffo line. It's a different labeling that's supporting the motorcycles, and it has images. You have different artists create these images each year that represent the bikes, as you were saying, like a digital inventory of your bikes. But the Gran Bianco is a blend of Viognier and Vermentino. So
that puts me in the summer mood, so I would probably say stick figure. I like a little reggae, stick figure-ish, and kind of just want me to hang out in the sun, having a good time.
I like that. What about your beloved Syrah?
I don't know, because so when you say Syrah to me, I go ribeye, and so it's kind of like I want to have a ribeye and that, and probably something loungy music, like something sexy where you're having a steak dinner and kind of like jazz or,
Making for a romantic evening.
Yeah, definitely.
What about Malbec?
I have to go traditional Argentine folklore, like a good tango, some of that really inspirational tango. When you listen to Carlos Gardel, which was the father of tango, there's so much passion there, and I feel like that, I don't know, I bring Malbec and tango together, right? And so I would probably say like Carlos Gardel, some glass. There's one in particular, Por una cabeza, that I actually played it at my wedding. God, I just love that song.
Oh. Okay, so now you released a wine for your 25th anniversary called Quattro. It's a blend of 4 grapes, one representing you, your 2 sisters, and your dad. So if you can let us know what those grapes are, and then I want you to pick a song with that. And since you have 4 personalities going into this wine, I want to see what you come up with.
So the wine is a blend of Cab, Malbec, Petit Syrah, and Zinfandel. And so, man, you got me on the song for that one, because trying to figure out, like, I know Sam would have some Grateful Dead in there, and Bridget likes the reggae and the hip hop too, and then my dad, I don't know, it's a tough one. You got me. It's like a mashup, right? Is there a remix that's available?
Well, I guess everyone will just have to drink the wine and put headphones on and listen independently. Well, Damian, you've been great. You survived. You've made it. I have one last question, and that is, how can people find you? And if they find you, what can they experience here? What is available here at Doffo?
So, of course, you can find us on the website, so doffowines.com, or Doffo Winery on Instagram, Moto Doffo Collection on Instagram as well for the moto side. At the winery, you can experience, tastings, tours. We do offer some food during the week. On the weekend, we do have a food truck that comes in and does chimichurri steak fries. You definitely got to try the chimichurri. It's one of our staple items that we produce. But I think you're going to experience world-class wines, great customer service, very welcoming, and an educated staff that knows their wines.
That's great. And motorcycle lovers, you can just ride on up here. There are a lot of motorcycle people that come here.
Yeah, and I totally forgot to mention that. And you can see, a collection of over 100 motorcycles. And, of course, there's Moto Doffo apparel that is great and designed in-house by my sister, and we have a whole new launch of apparel coming this fall.
Wonderful. Well, Damian, thanks for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and let's go brave the heat and get some wine.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.